and welcome to Women Positively Aging, the podcast for women in midlife and older who want to live well for longer. I'm your host, Barbara Bray, and in today's episode on gut health and aging, we'll be talking about what healthy aging really means when we're all so different as individuals. The aging process is influenced by so many factors: our physical environment, social environment, genetics, and many more. As we age, there can be changes to the way we absorb nutrients from food, our appetite can become disrupted, and our immune function altered. What about our gut microbiome? How does it change over time? What influences those changes, and can we do something about it? Our guest today is Rebecca Hirst, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for EY UK, and she'll talk about her experience of changing her diet in her 30s, the impact it had on her health, and her new passion for personalised nutrition and gut health. Our invited researcher is Emily Leeming, registered dietitian and head of programmes at Zoe, a health science company that uses novel digital technologies to tackle health issues. Zoe runs the world's largest in-depth nutritional research programme. A warm welcome to both of you, Emily and Rebecca. It's great to have you on the show today.
Hello, good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
It's going to be a great session, but I think we best start off by talking about the microbiome and what it actually is. Emily.
Yes, so the microbiome is a collection of different microbes that live in your lower intestine. So usually when we talk about your microbiome, we specifically tend to refer to bacteria, but there's also viruses, fungi, and yeast. And actually we have about 38 trillion microbial cells that live in our lower intestine. But actually probably about, within somebody's gut, about 200 to 1,000 bacterial species. And these all exert different health effects around the body because they digest the food that we eat and then produce metabolites that then transfer into our bloodstream and go around the body and have different impacts.
Thanks for that comprehensive explanation. So we know our starting point. And what I'm really interested to know is there a connection between gut health and aging? So how does our microbiome, how does it change throughout our lifetime?
Yeah, so our microbiome kind of is fascinating. It kind of shifts and develops as we grow in earlier life, and I'm happy to talk about that later if that's something that's interesting. As we get older and in adulthood, we have this kind of what we call our kind of adult microbial signature, which tends to stay pretty resilient, and it does fluctuate hour by hour, day by day, but actually we have these kind of core, what we call keystone taxa, which tend to kind of stay, if you zoom out and you look at kind of a year focus, to stay like fairly resilient. And that's partly to kind of prevent against perturbation. So any kind of, challenges, whether it's kind of an infection, for example, that we're able to bounce back. And then in later life, we find that actually, along with other physiological changes, a lot of that kind of diversity. So we talk about lots of the different types of microbes and lots of different types of bacteria that we have in our gut. So in theory, the more different types of bacteria we have, the more they're able to produce like different functions, different metabolites that I mentioned earlier that then can have different effects on the body. We tend to see as you get older that actually that microbial diversity can decrease. So you can have less different types of species that are then less able to kind of have that resilience that I mentioned earlier. And that tends to be a lot in line with that kind of overall natural progression of how our body slightly, don't want to say deteriorates, it's not necessarily a word that we want to use, but it's just our natural kind of way of our body kind of developing and perhaps slowing down a little as we get kind of older and older.
I like that piece around our bodies developing, because we do want to keep this about positivity. Our bodies are changing and developing all the time. But I guess the purpose of today will be coming at the end of the show to talk about what we can do about it and making sure that we maintain a good health status for as long as we possibly can. So perhaps this is a good time to introduce Rebecca into the conversation and hear about your journey, because you're now, am I allowed to say kind of your age range? I mean, obviously this is targeting people.
I'm happy to talk about my age. I'm 48.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm 48, but I am.
Welcome to the over or 40 plenty club, my Auntie Betty calls it. We don't
I love that.
experience that age. It's 40 plenty. I'll be using that for the next 30 years, I think.
Me too.
But you started to look at your diet in your 30s. Can you tell us about the trigger for that?
Yeah. I've worked in marketing for the past 25 years, and I had started a new job at Coca-Cola. And I know on a nutrition podcast, that's almost like blasphemy. And that's part of my journey. I was working for this amazing organization. So if you're a marketeer, to work for Coke is like, the holy grail. And I was absolutely loving it. But I was finding that my work life, which was a really long commute, a lot of travel. So I was on a plane or on the Eurostar pretty much every other week. And kind of just that whole like speedy, busy, full on kind of a life started to have an effect on my health. And at the same time, I developed adult acne for the second time in my life. So I'd had it in my 20s, sort of early 20s, and I had been prescribed Roaccutane by my dermatologist. So for anyone who's listening who's had severe acne, Roaccutane is a pretty horrendous experience in terms of the side effects on your body. It dries everything up, really. I mean, it's a high dose vitamin A basically, but it makes, or for me, and this is, many of the side effects for other people, it makes your eyes go bloodshot, your nose crack and bleed, your lips split, your tendons ache. You have to have a blood test every month because it's quite toxic for the liver. You're not allowed to get pregnant. There's all of these side effects from it. And so having had it in my 20s, supposedly Roaccutane will stop you from ever getting acne again. But lo and behold, I just started this kind of fancy pants new job at Coca-Cola. I was 34 and my adult acne came back. So I had to go back and see my dermatologist. And she's like, this is kind of strange. It doesn't usually reoccur if you've had Roaccutane. And at the same time, and this is like the moment that I am forever thankful for, I was recommended, someone recommended to me a nutritional therapist. So having just been prescribed Roaccutane again, age 34, with the prospect of going into my new job, standing in front of a room full of people having a nosebleed, because that's what happened quite a lot with the kind of drying of all your nasal cavities. Thankfully, someone said, go and see this nutritional therapist. And long story short, she helped me to understand that I was allergic to cow's milk. And I had never even considered that this could be a thing. And I'd been happily having a couple of lattes a day. I really love coffee. And I will always ask for extra hot, extra shot. And I kind of never really liked the taste of milk, but I really like the coffee. And it never twigged to me that I might be sort of just not really liking the taste of milk. It's almost like I didn't know what my gut was trying to tell me. So with her help, I completely changed my diet. I gave up gluten for a really long time and I gave up cow's milk. And lo and behold, in addition to Roaccutane, went on that for another 6 months. Since that journey of kind of age 34, understanding what worked for me and my body, I'm now 48, don't touch cow's milk at all now. And if I do, spots come out instantly on my face. It was something that I never twigged. And actually that the beginning of that journey, age 34, sent me on a whole other journey about understanding my body, but then going on to study nutrition myself. And just, I was amazed by something so simple. That thing that my body didn't really like was triggering all of these reactions. So yeah, it was, I'm forever thankful to her for pointing that out to me in the journey that we went on together.
Oh, thanks for sharing and being so candid. And like you say, it's about understanding what's right for your body, because you can get into a habit of doing things in a routine. And I think this is particularly interesting to me. I think finding when you age, you develop certain lifestyle patterns and certain habits which serve you well at parts of your life. But as you age, and like Emily was saying, you get developments and changes and the goalposts move. And because we're in our headspace of doing the same thing over and over again, we don't adapt to those moving goalposts. And It's interesting you talk about milk, because in my culture, my parents are from West Africa. A lot of people are actually lactose intolerant, and my parents have been drinking milk all through my childhood, and all of a sudden they were finding that they were having problems with it. And it's something that I've developed as I get older. So you start to have to drop some of the foods you've really loved because your body's changing. And I guess that's just part of accepting that that's who we are. Our bodies aren't static and we need to adapt to them. But by the same token, and Emily mentioned this, it's about making sure that we've got some good diversity in our diet. So if you're taking out one thing, what else can you find to make up that gap and not become more restrictive? So that's been a really interesting story. Thanks for sharing that, Rebecca.
No worries.
So I'm going to come back to you, Emily, and let's just flesh out some more about the changes that people go through. So Rebecca's touched on menopause, and with the work that you've done on Zoe, have you seen any issues that people have on menopause and gut health? And are you able to share any of that with us?
Well, I think we're actually looking particularly at menopause in much more closer lens, because it's such an area of research that we just don't know that much about yet, which is shocking considering we have 50% of the population being women. I think it's, we're kind of trying to hopefully stand a bit more on the soapbox at Zoe and say, hey, let's look at this, let's focus on this. So we have had some research come out by some of my associates on menopause, but it hasn't specifically been looking necessarily at the gut microbiome. But we have generally understanding of some of the research around this is that the gut microbiome plays a role in regulating our estrogen levels. So when it comes to menopause, for example, perhaps supporting our gut microbiome is actually may help us kind of regulate those estrogen levels, because we know obviously in menopause that your estrogen levels tend to decrease a little bit, and as you go and get older. So I think perhaps there's something there, and is it that we see talking about phytoestrogens and how those might be able to help with some of the menopausal symptoms. Is it that
Can I just interrupt you to talk about phytoestrogens and just explain what they are?
So phytoestrogens are a kind of plant-based, so from a plant, and it's got kind of a similar type of kind of to actually estrogen in our body. So it's kind of something that our body might recognize as being similar to estrogen, and the microbiome can then use an enzyme to break this down into estrogen molecules itself, that these travel around the body.
And I interrupted you when you were talking about protective effects, so if you can go back to that.
So if we can look after our microbiome, it could be just one of those kind of pieces of the puzzle that we can look after to help kind of support us and help us manage our symptoms. So for example, there's evidence around phytoestrogens and hot flushes and reducing hot flushes. And also in terms of, keeping our estrogen levels, high, as it perhaps means that we might find that, that onset of menopause might be slightly later than it would inherently otherwise.
So that's some interesting research to look forward to. And I'm also keen to explore what you were talking about earlier about diversity of foods. And I don't know with personalised nutrition, how easy it is to say to somebody, actually, your diet is diverse enough or it's not diverse. Could you elaborate on that? Because like I said, we are creatures of habit, and maybe that's one trick that we are missing.
Yeah, no, definitely. We are creatures of habit. And I think, in the kind of Western world, we tend to go to the supermarket and pick out, a couple of things, and it tends to be pretty similar week by week, and off we go. There's been interesting research around the fact that kind of 12 to 16-year-olds actually have greater microbial diversity than adults. And the researchers kind of hypothesized that perhaps this was because, you have a greater propensity to try new things at that age, whether it's your own choice or your parents probably telling you, you must eat whatever's put in front of you on the table. But there's definitely, I think we do keep circling back to this plant diversity, this dietary diversity element. And this is predominantly based on research by the American Gut Project, which was the largest, I think still is one of the largest citizen science projects, where they collected multiple stool samples from 10,000 people in the US and the UK. And they found that microbial diversity, so diversity of the different bacterial species, was associated with plant diversity, so the number of different types of plant foods that you have in your diet. So when we talk about plant foods, we talk about legumes, nuts, seeds, vegetables, whole grains, and fruit. So it's not just your fruit and veggies. And these, it kind of makes sense. If you think you're providing your gut bacteria with lots of different types of foods, then those different bacteria will all have something that they have selective substrates that they like to consume. And then those will then all exert different beneficial metabolites that come from those different bacterial species that then go and exert different health effects. So that's something really where we can, really look after and support our gut microbiome, is really having that gut diversity and that plant diversity.
That's brilliant. And I think it's going to be hard for people to understand how diverse their diet actually is, because from one person to another, I think it is very different. And we're creatures of habit, but we're also very good at overestimating what we're good at and underestimating what we're bad at. So I've heard it said by many a doctor when they ask a patient how much units of alcohol they have in a given week, they always have to add on a few because they know that the person's going to underestimate. But if they ask them how much fruit and veg they eat in a given week, everyone knows, won't it?
Something called it's kind of social desirability bias, where we typically underreport certain things, and we probably over-report other things that we think are a bit more social desirable. But I think in terms of personalisation, just to go back to what Rebecca was saying, obviously if you're an intolerant or you have an allergy, that's something that is potentially going to give you symptoms, is not going to make you feel great. Because ultimately, what is this all about? It's about feeling great and having energy as your body changes and evolves. And how can we best support that? I think, if we take out the side of intolerances and allergies, it's really about having that dietary diversity as much as possible and adding things in rather than taking things away. And I think that's really something that I really try and focus on when I talk on these things. It's, not, oh, should we be reducing this or cutting these things out? It's like, how can we add more in? How can we, try a new different vegetable, try a different fruit, have fun with this, what tastes good?
Well, thank you very much for that. And going back to Rebecca, so just to get an idea from you, what is it you've ditched and what have you increased, if you want to share with us?
I love the idea of having fun with trying new stuff, and the idea of eating a rainbow of things and finding things that you haven't tried before. Takes the pressure off, doesn't it? So what have I ditched? Well, I'm perimenopausal now, so 48. I'm well into perimenopause. And one of the things I found, one of my sort of main symptoms through perimenopause was heart palpitations. So I had everything checked out and nothing to worry about. It's just benign ectopic beats, as they're called, like slightly irregular beats that come on throughout the day. And the cardiologist said that I needed to give up caffeine. So having been a dedicated coffee drinker for the whole of my life, without milk since the age 34-year-old episode, I firmly believed it was one of my daily pleasures, and that I'm pretty healthy the rest of the time. I was like, I love a good coffee. And when I said to the cardiologist, or he asked me, how many coffees a day do you have? I said, I've cut down. I have one in the morning, my breakfast, and one straight after my lunch, but that's it. And he said, fully caffeinated? I was like, He went, oh, it's going to have to go. I was like, oh no, not my coffee. So I went cold turkey. And for anyone that's had a couple of coffees every day for 20 odd years, going cold turkey is not a pleasant experience. But I knew that the only way that I would ever give up coffee was if someone told me I had to. So 3 days of horrendous headaches later, I was over the caffeine withdrawal. And now I maybe have an odd decaf now and again for I love the bitter taste of it. But coffee's gone completely. And I've actually now, I love what you said, Emily, about it's really this is all about feeling good in our bodies and having lots of energy. In fact, I probably feel better from having given up caffeine than not. So I think it's been a really positive move. And the other thing that unsurprisingly he said to me was alcohol's not brilliant for heart palpitations, nor is it brilliant for hot flushes either, right? So it's kind of a it's kind of a win-win if you start to either take alcohol out or reduce alcohol. So now I talk about, I love a glass of champagne. I mean, I always thought coffee and champagne would be my vices, but now it's the odd glass of champagne. And I talk about high days and holidays or long haul flights. So if someone offers me a glass of champagne on a high day or a holiday, I'm going to have one, but the rest of the time I kind of have to take it or leave it. And I'm all right with that. And I feel much better as a result, and the palpitations have subsided, and I was not getting loads of hot flushes, but they were starting to kick in. So they're the things I've dropped, and the thing that I've started having daily recently has massively helped with hot flushes is aloe vera juice. So I have maybe an egg cup full of it every morning before my breakfast, and that's really helped. So it's a random one to add to the diversity of plant-based foods that I'm not eating, drinking in this instance.
And that's interesting. So you found a balance of things that give you more energy and are right for you. And again, it goes back to what we were saying about everybody needs to find actually what's right for them, because there's no carbon cutout that says this is what will work for everybody in perimenopause or everybody in menopause. And I think it's about moving away from those strict lists that you get from different fad diets that say everybody needs to do this or everybody needs to do that. It's about working out what's for you. And I think the personalised nutrition approach will become a lot more popular. But also the messages about balance and diversity, because like Emily was saying, it's very easy to tell. And I think I'm not going to blame any doctors, but I think it's easy for doctors to tell people to stop doing something than it is to start. Unless you're a GP, where every GP says you need to do more exercise. But that's almost like a mantra, isn't it? You need to do more exercise, like I'm doing 4 hours a week as it is. But I think it's interesting how we approach things, and I can start to see a change in how people are realising what works for them, and they're not copying what their hairdresser did or copying what their mum did. Or, we're all very, very different people, and we all have different eating experiences and different environments. And I know from my own research that our food environment shapes our choices, in inverted commas. It's more about our food practices, how we access food, and what our daily structure is, whether we're at home, whether we're commuting. That all shapes our food experience, and finding what's right for an individual point of view is very important. So exercise, actually, we haven't really talked much about that, Emily. When you're looking at from a Zoe point of view at people's diets, do you also look at exercise, or is that something that's a separate entity?
That's something I think we're looking to explore further in the future, but it's not something that we've looked at the moment. We have looked at sleep a little bit, because obviously we do want to consider all the different, pillars of health, which is very much, diet, movement, de-stressing, trying to, and sleep, to try to really improve all those behaviours. But predominantly our focus at Zoe is very much that diet and giving personalised dietary advice. In terms of sleep, what's really interesting is that we found that your glycemic response in the mornings, if you've had a bad night's sleep, was more disrupted and dysregulated. So actually, if you're having a poor night's sleep and, you want to wake up, inherently we want something that's quite comforting, don't we? I don't know about you, if I have a bad night's sleep, I'd much more rather go and have, a croissant, probably a cup of coffee to make me more alert. But actually what we see from that research was really interesting, was actually having more of a glucose steady breakfast was probably more likely to give you, specifically on those days where you've had, a bad night's sleep, is more likely to help you feel, more energized throughout the day, and just prevent kind of having these kind of, overt, excessive glucose spikes. So not microbiome necessarily related, but could be, we don't know if that maybe there is an element of microbiome in that, but that specific bit of research was, I think, really interesting. And when I say glucose steady breakfast, we're talking about, perhaps having more of a savoury breakfast. So, eggs and avocado on rye bread, something like that, or just making sure you've got, a fat and a protein source. So perhaps having Greek yogurt together with some kind of, like fruits and, berries, for example, and some nuts and seeds.
That's some great advice. I tend to have two breakfasts, porridge or eggs, and flip between the two. So I think it's probably time to mix things up and see how it goes. But I found that the one thing that I really struggled with during menopause was sleep. Sometimes I'd have a good night's sleep, but most times I wasn't. And I can totally understand the whole I don't want what's in the fridge for breakfast. I'm going to go and get a croissant from the local supermarket, because that's how you feel when you get up. But I'm so pleased to hear that it's not just me. It's my biology. It's life in general. So that is comforting. So I know what I need to do really to break that habit is, well, not necessarily go to bed early. I don't necessarily know why we have bad sleep when we're menopausal, but you have your routine. Some days you sleep, some days you don't. So I'll be following the Zoe results with interest and put my name down on the wait list to become one of the participants as well. But that was really interesting about learning some of the things that are around and connected to our gut health and how that can help us. What I'm really interested in talking to just before we close are the things that we can focus on as we age. What do we need to pay attention to, and what do we need to be doing differently and look out for? I'll start with Emily.
So yeah, I think we've got, we're talking about healthy aging, and it's something that all of us, at some point in our lives, are gonna come across, and we need to think about. And I think I really appreciate that you brought up the fact that actually our environment is a huge factor in our food choices and our health, because ultimately, I think there's so much onus on the individual, which can be incredibly stressful. But there are things that we can feel empowered about, and thinking about our home environment is actually a really good thing. Is like, how can we fill our cupboards with things how can we make things easily accessible to choose choices that are going to help us support our microbiome. So things that we can do is very much that plant diversity. It can be something as simple as, getting the mixed pack of vegetables from the frozen, supermarket aisle, having frozen, something that's basically probably not as exciting as you might see if someone's talking about kombucha or anything like that, but actually is going to give you really great nutrients and, something quick and easy. Spanning all the way to the spectrum of trying maybe a new grain, if it's something like quinoa that you haven't had before, or even just, trying a new vegetable that you haven't included. Rebecca mentioned, thinking about the colours of your diet, so the diversity, that rainbow effect, because we know in each different colour of vegetables and fruit, that colour is coming from phytochemicals called polyphenols, and these have they act as prebiotic fibres on the gut microbiome, so feeding them. Having that, making sure that we're keeping that exercise up. So definitely also the resistant exercise is really important for our bone health, but also for our microbiome. We see that having kind of good level of physical activity is really good, again, for that microbial diversity. And I guess the other things to say there would probably be fermented foods. So I did mention kombucha, but actually most of the evidence is around kefir. At the moment, just in terms of the amount of research that has been done, but also we're talking about kimchi, sauerkraut, those kinds of foods that have been fermented. And actually there's been recently a research paper that's come out to show that 6 servings of fermented foods a day has been shown to be associated with reduced inflammatory markers and kind of increased microbial diversity. Of course, that is a lot. But it's just, I definitely don't eat 6 portions a day, but it just gives an insight that perhaps that's another way of adding, a new vegetable that also is fermented and has some kind of, live bacteria in it that could hopefully be actually supporting your health as long as you enjoy it. All of this is about things that you enjoy, and, social experiences. And I guess the last thing on that, on social experiences, is contact with other humans. We know from hugging other people, kissing other people, that we have this amazing share of microbes, even shaking someone's hand. So that social contact is hugely important.
I like that you ended on that. So we need to be choosy about who we hug and who we shake hands with, because we want the best microbiome and the best microbe transfer between the two, don't we? And the other thing I picked up was what you said about sauerkraut. So back in the 90s, I did a placement in Germany, and it fascinated me that the teenagers at lunchtime, instead of going to, I guess, their equivalent, it was probably their equivalent of like a Greg's, they go and get chips with sauerkraut on. I was thinking, genius, potatoes and fermented foods. Like, who knew that was even a thing? And whilst I'm not necessarily recommending that's what people go out and do, it's really to illustrate the point that you don't have to make expensive lifestyle choices. They can be as simple as just putting two plain old things together that add to the diet. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Rebecca, have you been inspired by anything that you've heard from Emily? Is there anything you're fancy thinking, oh, I must change that now?
Oh, I just love the idea of the rainbow and getting as much colour in as possible. And I think the other thing that's really important when we're trying to make good food choices is that we eat with our eyes as much as we eat with, the rest of our body. So the idea that beautiful, colourful, crunchy things on our plate is a feast for our eyes as well as for our body. I love that notion. So just the idea of filling my plate with lots of colour is a good thing. So yeah, I'm definitely going to keep doing that.
Oh, that's brilliant news, especially for the fresh produce fans that we have on this show, having a fresh produce background. But that's not to diss frozen at all. I think frozen vegetables and fruit, especially now that we're going into a time of, cost constraints and issues, incredibly important to get those cans of peas, to get that frozen bag of smoothie veg in the freezer and use those and really try and be different with our food choices and look at things from a different point of view and be a bit more inclusive, like Emily was saying about adding things into the diet that we probably haven't thought of before. So as we age, it's a time to expand and be more positive about life, isn't it? So I'd like to thank you both very much for joining me on today's podcast and helping us understand our gut health a bit more and ways that which we can help improve things as we age. And for the listeners, thank you very much for joining us. Do subscribe and give us comments and feedback. And I'd love to have you at the next episode, which I can't remember what I'm having next, but I will definitely, if you've subscribed, make sure you get pinged about it. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you on the next episode. Thank you to you, the listeners, for joining us today for today's episode of Gut Health and Healthy Aging. I hope you've got some great take-home points and things that you've learned that you can implement in your own lives as well. Do subscribe to the podcast, click, share, like, whatever it is you want to do, and also give us feedback. And by subscribing, you'll be notified of when the next episode lands on the podcast platforms. Thank you again, take care, and in the meantime, stay well.